look somewhat like cross ties or cross each other, actually hold the whole thing up. There is no place in which those wooden members are embedded back into the brick wall, which I find really very amazing. Now, on the landings, however, right above us here, these beams are obviously embedded back into the brickwork, which explains how they stay up there. In this case, they were embedded in that big wooden member going across there. But when you begin the curved part, there's no place where the wood actually sticks back into the brick. So it's really quite an amazing structure. We found in our research that they were probably built by a man named Horace King, who was a freed slave. He's our only known case where the Alabama legislature actually freed a slave. This took place in 1844. Mr. King, prior to his being set free, was owned by a man who lived near Tuscaloosa, and Mr. King was a self-taught engineer and mathematician, one of these born geniuses who had no real formal education that we know of. But he and a very wealthy businessman, whose name was Robert Jemison in Tuscaloosa, formed a partnership in which they built the first wooden truss. Search behind loads of information without success. Okay, let's go downstairs. When they got it here, shipped by train, when it arrived, they suddenly realized they could not possibly get this huge thing into the building. It was so big. So they went over here and cut out this big section of the wall, as you see the scar, clear down through the foundation wall below. And then they dug a huge trench out into the lawn in order to get this enormous vault back over in that corner where you're all standing there. And they took up the floor. You can see it's been patched in this big rectangular shape here. They removed all that flooring because that helped them get the vault in position, and then they had the floor reinforced concrete all around the whole thing. I won't take you down to the vault because all you would see would just be a big locked door. And access to it is by this staircase right here, which was cut in 1942 to give them a way to get down to the vault. We're planning on closing that staircase so that we can reopen the old fireplace there. And from here on out, their access to the vault will be through a doorway into the basement below. They cut the basement wall. They will come back into this office, treasurer's office, staff, part of the staff relocated here, but there'll be access to this old wall back here in the corner to the tourists. There'll be a rail put up here to separate the tourists from the work people out here in the center. Now, if you want to take this flashlight and back in there a few at a time, what we call construction of the vault, governor's suite, and it served as the offices of the governor from 1851 to 1912. In 1912, when they added that wing down there, they moved the governor down into the new wing into a very beautiful office that he occupies even to this day. This was his private office, though, originally, and it was a very small room with a fireplace back here, and there was a big small wall back here, not much different from the one you just saw in the treasurer's office. There was a little metal door on the inside, and there was a wooden door on the outside to hide the fact that it was actually false. The middle door right there is the only original door. This one to the right next to it, was added later. So actually there was only one doorway that went into the room beyond. And that room just beyond out there was the reception room, and it housed the entire governor's staff. It's hard to think of the entire governor's staff today.
You really want to say that?
Left this space in 1912 and moved into the new offices down the hall. The state immediately took the space and chopped it up into small offices, and they ran a partition across here right from the edge of that window directly back to the corner of this door. And then they ran another partition from right here to that wall there. And you can see in each place a long narrow strip where the partition butted up against the wall. And when we took the partition out, we were very gratified to find something that we fully expected to find. We knew that in 1869-70 there was an artist at work in here whose name was Peter Schmidt. He was a trompe-l'oeil artist. Trompe-l'oeil is a French word which means fool the eye. And what he did was to create the illusion of that three-dimensional paneling that I showed you in the photograph in the house chamber upstairs. And above the door on that hatch, that the partition protected, you can see a small portion of his work. And it does indeed look like a three-dimensional piece of wooden molding. And that's just one corner of one of those big rectangular panels that went all the way around this room and also the room beyond the private office inside. You can also see faintly at the very top where there was a hand-painted crown molding also painted on the wall up there. We're going to have all that reproduced. There are still trompe-l'oeil artists today who can do that kind of work. Our paint analyst, whom I told you is still taking samples of paint and analyzing it for us, will come and analyze that, give us the original colors. All this old paint fades terribly with age. It's probably much whiter than that originally. And he will also tell us the composition of the paint used, and we'll put our artists to work and recreate that. The fireplaces will be reopened with the wooden mounds. The floors will be refinished and big area oriental type carpet is put down. This will become a museum space also. We know a great deal about furniture and that sort of thing that was in here. And we'll put it back to honor all those governors who occupied this space for so many years. I meant to take you into the office across the hall, but it's occupied right now, so I'm going to bring you in quite quick. This was the original 1912 Secretary of State suite. He moved from down the hall in 1912 when this wing was built. This is the reception room for the governor's offices. Notice the nice plastic cornice. You'll find that cornice, one similar to it, throughout this entire suite, even upstairs. There are beautiful cornices like this. This room and the room adjoining it were heavily redecorated in 1945. Before that time, all this woodwork was stained mahogany. Base boards, every piece of woodwork was seen was dark finish. It wasn't real mahogany wood like we saw over in the office a few minutes ago. It was stained to match that. The floors were always carpeted. In fact, they weren't just a few weeks ago. We tore it out. In 1945, the reason for painting this was that the interior decorator outfitted this room in reproduction and some authentic Regency-style antique furniture, which looks best with painted woodwork and is historically associated with painted woodwork. So he came through and painted all the woodwork, sort of call it. We're going to leave pretty much the decor that you see here. Of course, we'll clean everything up, repaint, put down new carpeting and all that sort of thing. We don't have a great deal of real restoration work to do in this suite. By the way, those two little rooms in the back there were little secretarial offices originally. In recent years, they have served as the offices for security men and also for news media people, press secretaries, staff, and that kind of thing. Now, this was the executive secretary. with a solid wall. That was just one of those things that happens in these major decorations from time to time. Thank goodness, though, they did not fool the governor's main office here in 1945. They left it alone. And this is the one that will look, that office across the hall you just came out of will look like eventually, I hope, one of these days soon. Mahogany paneling, it's not just stained or fake, it's actual San Domingo mahogany. The fireplace is beautiful, very antique marble, and this room also has the matching baseboards, marble baseboards all the way around. The ceiling is original. This is a photograph of the room when it was brand new in 1912, and you can see that there's not a whole lot of difference in the room. Probably the major change that's been made is that the chandelier has been replaced. They now have a crystal chandelier that hangs there instead of this brass one. All the furniture that you see in this photograph is original to 1912, and we have every single piece of it. It's still in use by the governor's office and will be brought back in here. It's very nice mahogany furniture, beautiful furniture. The only other thing they did in 1945, which distresses us a little bit, but we certainly understand why they did it. They cut a doorway through this paneled wall, which was a little bit unfortunate. But as I say, we know why. Before this doorway was added, the only way a person could come in to see the governor was to traipse through the executive secretary's office, which I'm sure was very disruptive to the executive secretary all the way, back and forth, someone traipsing through. So in 1945, the workmen cut this doorway to give access to visitors straight through this little filing room, which is what this originally was. And it goes directly on into the reception room, right through that little space there. In the early 1970s, the elevator was installed for George Wallace when he was handicapped, and we're going to leave that, of course, just in case there's ever another handicapped governor or a member of the governor's staff. That goes down to the basement, and then there's a little private hallway that takes him out directly to his automobile outside back of the Capitol. For security purposes, it's also a very good thing to have in the building. It gives the governor a way of getting in and out of the building without being exposed during the time afterwards. So we certainly will leave that. I believe that door is open. Let's see if we can go through there.
Tom, we have a quick question here before you go on.
Art?
We have a quick architectural question.
Okay.
You'll have to come here.
Gentlemen, you're on.
It's hard. When we're looking around here at the woodwork, see the little circles?
Yes, they fall off.
Oh, have they?
Yes. Here's some of them still in existence, I believe, right over this fireplace. There's 2 or 3 still intact up there. There's a couple down here over this window. And not only have they fallen off, but there are some little beads up there that have fallen off also. Yeah. But the bigger circles underneath too, you can see the outlines of where they were. They're about the size of a 50-cent piece.
They've just fallen off.
They've just fallen off. They were glued on. This is the 1851 Governor's Suite. This was the original Governor's Suite before the current one was added in 1911 and 12. Originally this was a 2-room suite. One of the rooms, this large one, was used as the reception area, and then the smaller office was the private office of the governor. This suite was painted in trompe-l'oeil about 1869 or 70 by an artist named Peter Schmidt. Okay, this is an example of some of the trompe-l'oeil we have uncovered. This happens to be one of the better examples, and it was trompe-l'oeil means fool the eye painting. It was done to imitate a 3-dimensional paneling surrounded by a wooden molding, and at the very top you can see sort of in a dull brown color a fake cornice along with the wooden molding.
You want to tell me what this is?
This is the governor's private suite, or private office rather, just off of the reception room. And inside there was a fireplace next to the window, And in the far back corner was a little private vault that was for the governor's private papers. Okay, the
Just tell us.
right next to the window where you see the baseboard loose from the floor, and the governor's vault was over in the far corner, with the little wooden door on it now. Originally, it had a little metal door on the inside covered by a wooden door on the outside, and it was used for the storage of the governor's private.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and tell us.
All right, this is the 1851 Secretary of State suite, the original Secretary of State suite in the building. And it, like the governor's suite across the hall, was a two-room suite. This large room was the reception room, and the smaller room beyond was the private office of the Secretary of State. The door on the far right is not original. The taller door in the middle of the wall is original. The shorter door was originally not there and was cut through for a little closet about the turn of the century.
Tell us what that is.
All right, this is some more of the trompe-l'oeil that was done in the 1860s or early 70s by the same artist who did the governor's suite across the hall. His name was Peter Schmidt, and he did several spaces throughout the building.
Okay.
This was a vault for the Secretary of State, similar to the one across the hall for the governor. It was a private vault for the Secretary of State's papers. Okay.
Tell us what it is or say it.
All right. This is some ghosts of some of the pigeonholing and bookshelving that our research showed was added into this suite to accommodate all of the large collection of papers that the Secretary of State had to keep. In fact, the documentation said that the shelving and storage went clear to the ceiling, and indeed this proves that that was true. Okay.
Go ahead.
On the floor beneath that book shelving and pigeonhole ghost pattern is a patch in the floor where there was originally a little staircase that went down to the basement below, where the Secretary of State had yet additional storage space for the keeping of state's records. It was closed in about the turn of the century and floored over, and a little closet was built there in place of the staircase.
Tell us what this is.
All right, looking at the northwest corner of the old Supreme Court chamber, the 1851 chamber, I noticed the curved wall in the background with the door opening in the middle. The wall itself is original. It was a brick curved wall. The trim around the door is not original. That's probably about 1920s. This column is one of the original masonry columns. In the center of the room, the flanking cast iron ones on either side were added in the 1940s during a renovation, and the ceiling above was not very secure, so the architect added the cast iron columns for extra support. Directly opposite that column is the wooden core of another column, which has been dismantled, all except the wooden center section right over here.
Okay, I can't get, I can't see it from here, so it is. And then, okay, yeah.
The beveled wooden core is the center of another masonry column, which has been torn down. It was torn down in the 1940s when this chamber was subdivided into office spaces. The bracing you see built around it was added just very recently by the architect as extra support for the ceiling above. This room was painted in trompe-l'oeil, like the two spaces we just saw in the 1851 portion of the building.
Okay, tell us what it is.
The glass doors at the east end of the Supreme Court chamber was the original location of the Supreme Court Justice's bench. Flanking either side of those glass doors was a doorway that went beyond into the Supreme Court library, which was not added until 1885. This was actually the back of the building until 1885, when the additional section was built to accommodate the growing library of the Supreme Court.
Go ahead.
And this is the 1885 Supreme Court Library. The cast iron columns down the center were originally surrounded by a massive double tier of oak bookcases. You could walk completely around the center section of bookcasing, however, and on either side were 3 fireplaces against the outside walls. Each outside wall had 3 fireplaces, making a total of 6 fireplaces in the room altogether. And from the ceiling, there were a number of large gas chandeliers on.
Okay, now see.
Notice the very nice cast iron capitals, fluted capitals at the tops of these 2 end columns. These were the only columns that were exposed outside the bookcasing, and that's why they have the nice ornate capitals at the top, and the other columns do not. This is one of the 6 fireplaces in the room. They were originally probably used with wood and or may have been used with wood originally, but they definitely burned coal in later years, and they're very narrow, shallow fireplaces.
Capitol. We are looking at the excavation for the new tunnel, which will connect the Capitol with the new state, what's called New State House, down on the right. There will also be a connection to the parking lot, which will
Okay, you can start. I'm on both the buildings and the tunnel.
Well, the grading for the floor area for the first section of the new tunnel to be constructed. You can see where it comes in there, the L's and there. It'll probably be cut off right there, and the painted going put in there, and it'll form and put the rebar steel in there, and go ahead and complete that section and then add another one.
What's the tunnel going to be used for?
It's just to connect these 2 buildings, the Capitol and the State House together. There were plans for the future, but I don't think they'll ever be developed. The tunnel would extend on eastward that way into a huge parking deck. And then northward towards Folsom area and tie into that, but that was an architect rule.
Okay.
Well, looking at the system tunnel, this is 15 feet. 4 feet. Right up to it's approximately 8 feet. Over here, it's going to be about that area there. It's going to be about 40 feet down to the floor of the tunnel. Right here, old Capitol building.
All right, so tell us about that.
It is be extended out about 60 feet from where it is now. And it'll also be 3 stories high. Most of it will be rebuilt. It's also the entrance to a underground auditorium that we're going to have out on the right side. The left-hand side, right front of us there where we're standing. It's going to be a session area and also the mechanical rooms for the heating and cooling and everything on the Capitol building.
You said that again about the remodeling of it.
When they remodeled the State House over there, they included in the plan for the mechanical rooms over there, the heating and cooling. The State House, they added to it what they figured out that we needed over here at the Capitol. And they have a huge mechanical room over in the basement of the State House. And we would draw the hot and chill water over here, whichever one we need. Hot for winter and chill water for summer. It would come through the tunnel. And we won't have
The foundation.
that was put in there to support and keep the dirt from underneath the Capitol from coming out from under it and caving in and drop that end of the building. That is auger cast pilings, and they go 50 and 60 feet deep in the ground. And if you can see the three metal things in the middle of that concrete beam there are ties. They go all the way through the building into a beam on the other side, and it's tying that, connecting that, tie that together. And we're drilling back into underneath the Capitol building about 45 feet at an angle of about 30 or 40 degrees. And we're putting steel cable in the hole that we're drilling, and then pumping that full of concrete and calling that a tieback. And that is to tie on to this bunch of piling that you see, and reinforcing those, keep the pressure, the foundation, and everything, and kept pushing the dirt out from under.
Okay.
Around the Capitol.
Yes, sir.
It'll be a good year from now. The fact of it is that it never will be open around the Capitol again. Like I say, we're going to have just about where we're standing is going to be a little underground building, and on the other side the same thing. The driveway will stop right along in this area right out here. Stops on the other side. Outside road around the Capitol anymore. That opened in about 120 days.
Is it coming across?
Yeah, the first line we see out here with the little red rolling around it is the 4-inch gas main. And the other that is suspended out there is Southern Bell telephone line cable. Also a bunch of the state cable in there. I think it's 50,000 pairs of wires, and about 20,000 of them are in use. I said, before I got into this, I really didn't know what restoration meant. It's a lot of difference than it in regular construction. And take, for instance, 1979 and 80, we did the outside of this building. You notice up there, the corners of that work is nothing but stucco. And looked like a piece of huge crown mold. And the people built that up a little bit at the time, and used a template, just the shape of that, and pull that pattern across there, and created that thing. You would think it's a big piece of crown molding, but it's all stucco.
Go ahead.
The block parts up there is what we call dental work. I don't know where it came from. But on the center section of the Capitol, that is all brickwork with